Growing up as a kid, I didn't have access to a lot of Genesis games, so when there were games released on both the Genesis and SNES, I of course migrated to the Nintendo side. A friend of mine, on the other hand, owned a Genesis, and that was the primary way I was able to get any hands-on time for it. Back then, I didn't realize that the SNES version of Aladdin was completely different than the Genesis game. Nowadays, it's pretty common knowledge, but when I got the Genesis cartridge in one of my monthly video game monthly boxes, I knew I had to play and review it. If you've seen the movie, you'll have the idea of the story. It's been probably close to 30 years since I've watched it, but I'll try to summarize it at least a little bit. You play as the guy in the name of the game, who is just a normal thief in the city of Agrabah. He meets up with some woman named Jasmine, who in typical Disney fashion just so happens to be a princess. She can't marry Aladdin due to rules, and Aladdin gets tricked into fetching stuff for the bad guy Jafar. But when he's trapped in the caverns, he rubs a lamp to brush off some dirt and bam! Genie complete with 3 wishes. And from here, the movie progresses along more plot points that I would rather not spoil for you. Because although I don't remember much, I do know enough that it's still a fantastic movie and probably my favorite Disney film. Although, that's not saying much because I truly don't remember many Disney films in general, but I digress. The game does play as a platformer, with you controlling Aladdin as he goes throughout locations found in the movie. You start at the city streets, fighting with the palace guards, and need to just get to the end of the level. In between each stage, you're given some small scenes from the movie along with text to explain what's going on. Think of it as a Cliff's Notes version of watching the film, and you'll understand what these scenes are like. Or, they're just like almost every other 8 or 16-bit movie to game adaptation out there. As there are plenty of ledges to jump to and enemies to defeat, you obviously need to have a way to take down said enemies, correct? Well, yeah. There are 2 different ways for this. One is the sword that Aladdin carries around. I honestly don't remember him having a sword in the movie, at least not until the very end, but again, it's been a while. The sword is your typical melee weapon, and can even be used to parry your enemy's attacks if timed properly, which is pretty neat. The screen seems to flash when this happens, which is kinda weird. But, hey, it works. The second attack you have is the ranged projectile, which happens to be apples. Yes, apples. They are littered throughout the stages, and you can throw them at the enemies, provided that you have some left in your pockets. Unfortunately, when you die, you lose all of the apples you had been carrying, but there are typically enough laying around that you can regain your supplies pretty quickly, which is good because the apples are a great tool to defeat enemies at a range. Of course, you'll probably be using the sword to defeat the guards, and there's a weird thing I've noticed with this. The hit detection seems somewhat suspect at times. I can never really tell if I was hitting the enemy or not, because there oftentimes wasn't any feedback. Of course, I knew I was getting struck, and the Invincibility Frames aren't exactly a thing in Aladdin. Okay, I lied. There are Invincibility Frames, but they just don't seem to be long enough to really be able to react. Especially if you make a jump and land directly onto an enemy. You'll just keep taking damage until you can either struggle enough to kill the enemy, or run away. Taking some major hurt is something that happened to me a few times because of this. The hit detection on Aladdin also carries over to some of the platforming. It was mostly seen in the dungeon stage, as I was trying to leap onto these ledges that went in and out of the wall. There were a few times where I jumped and, although I should have clearly landed on it, I fell straight through back to the ground level. It was incredibly frustrating, as this stage requires a lot of jumping back and forth between these types of ledges. Most of them behaved properly, but there were still a few that I struggled to get past. Thankfully, there were no instant death bottomless pits in these areas, but still, this should have been fixed before release, as I can't imagine I'm the only one that had this kind of issue. And it happened on multiple playthroughs, so it wasn't a once and done kind of deal. And that's not all for oddities. I found a strange glitch in the 3rd level thief boss. I'm thinking it's because I entered the boss area and then left quickly, but the boss was all discolored, as its sprite was messed up, and I was able to keep striking him until he died. Again, I don't understand it, but it happened, so I'm reporting it. There is another boss directly afterwards, and he was fine, so I don't know what the deal with this one was. Let's move on from the bugs. The stages of the game are somewhat large, containing a heavy mix of both horizontal and vertical areas, which is very different from the SNES game. The game also encourages a bit of exploration, as you can find plenty of bonus items such as red gems, health, extra lives, and chances at the 2 bonus games. One of the bonus games has you play as Abu as he attempts to dodge hazards and collect the items that fall. These were fun, and you just really need to find a specific pickup for that. The genie heads, on the other hand, are used in the kinda sorta not really slot machine bonus game. This one is simple enough. You press a button and whatever is shown you obtain. Truthfully, I suck at this game. I typically got Jafar, which immediately ends the bonus game and puts you into the next stage. At least you keep whatever genie heads you've accumulated though. You might be wondering what the red gems are for. Well, you can find a shopkeep throughout the stage. He'll open up his table for you, and he only has 2 items to sell you. Lives and continues. Lives are 5 gems, and continues are 10. My mentality is 3 lives are better than 1, so I typically bought the continues. Obviously, this means continues are limited, and I was able to burn through about 6 of them easily within the Cavern of Wonders escape level. Seriously, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong here or not, but I cannot make this jump. Is it because of the Retron 5 emulation? It might explain the odd pixels down here, but I can't help but think I'm doing something wrong. But then again, I was able to climb up this platform here like a ladder, so I'm not really sure. So, needless to say, I cannot complete this game due to this stage. I need to get an actual Genesis to try this again. Oh well. So yeah, if you haven't noticed, the game is incredibly different from the SNES game, and there's a few reasons why. Well, the main reason is that the 2 different companies worked on each game. The SNES version was made by Capcom. This one, on the other hand, was done by Virgin Games. Apparently they had help with Disney directly, which explains why the animation is so damn good. Seriously though, it's amazing. Every move is done smoothly, and even things like guards laughing and taunting you look fantastic. The levels themselves have some great detail to them, even though a lot of them feel like they were drawn in the same color schemes. Another difference is that the game just plays faster overall. The SNES is a bit slower in nature, but the blast processing from the Sega helps lend to its overall pacing. I will say I do like that a little bit more. When Aladdin is running, it actually feels like he is truly running. The combat is also much more frenetically paced, especially when using the sword. Again, hit detection can be a bit frustrating, but it's something that you get used to, I promise. I already mentioned the graphics, so I suppose I can close the review by talking about the sound, which is just okay. It's the typical Genesis style music stuff, and I can't say that I remember any of it other than knowing that each song was a take on one of the songs from the movie. I don't personally think they were exceptionally done or anything, and none of the songs stuck in my head, but it's not as bad as you want to mute the TV or anything. So that's Aladdin on Genesis. Everyone seems to be of the opinion that it's the better game when compared to the NES one, but I'm not everyone. Maybe it's just nostalgia talking, but I definitely had more fun with the other 16-bit game. Don't get me wrong, the Genesis Aladdin isn't bad. The gameplay is smooth, and it does look fantastic. The difficulty just gets that extreme bump in the Cavern of Wonders, and the bugs that I found don't help it score any. But again, it's not a bad game. In fact, it's still fairly enjoyable. If all you had was a Genesis and not an SNES, it's still a solid game that you could play to still get that Aladdin fix if you didn't want to watch the movie. Final score? 5 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.